Did she really just smile while recounting how she ruined the happiest day of her son's life? Yes, she did. And what she didn't know was that the piece of evidence sitting in the plaintiff's bag was about to turn her smug grin into a prison sentence. You think you've seen evil mothers-in-law? You think you've seen jealous relatives who can't let go? You haven't met Evelyn St. This 55-year-old socialite walked into the courtroom looking like she was attending a garden party, draped in pearls and smelling of expensive French perfume. She believed that her last name and her bank account gave her the right to treat people like dirt. She was being sued by her own daughter-in-law, a young school teacher named Maya, for $10,000 in damages. The claim? That Evelyn had intentionally destroyed the wedding reception, ruined the custom-made bridal gown, and caused extreme emotional distress. But Evelyn wasn't worried. She had her story straight. She had her lies prepared. She thought she was just there to write a check and make the trash go away. But she had no idea that Judge Judith Sterling was about to peel back the layers of her deception and reveal a level of malice that would shock the entire nation. Before we get into the explosive testimony, comment guilty if you think family members who sabotage weddings deserve jail time. Because what happens in this courtroom isn't just a lawsuit, it is a war. The atmosphere in the courtroom was suffocating. Maya, the plaintiff, looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. Her eyes were swollen, her hands were trembling as she gripped the podium, and she kept glancing over at Evelyn with a look of pure terror. On the other side, Evelyn stood with perfect posture, checking her manicure, looking bored. When Judge Sterling entered, the bailiff called for order, but you could already feel the electricity in the air. Judge Sterling, known for her sharp tongue and ability to detect a liar from a mile away, sat down and adjusted her glasses. She looked at the file, then looked at the two women. She didn't say a word for a full minute. She just let the silence stretch until it was uncomfortable. Then she looked at Maya. You were suing your mother-in-law for ruining your wedding, the judge said, her voice flat. That is a serious accusation. You are claiming she threw a glass of red wine on you on purpose? Not spelled. Threw. Is that correct? Maya took a shaky breath. Yes, Your Honor. It was the moment before the first dance. She walked up to me, looked me in the eye, said, "You will never be good enough," and threw the entire glass of Cabernet onto my white silk dress. The audience gasped. A collective murmur of disbelief rippled through the gallery. But Evelyn actually chuckled. It was a soft, cruel sound that cut through the noise. Judge Sterling's head snapped toward the defendant. Is something funny, Mrs. St. Clair? The judge asked, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Evelyn smiled, a fake, practiced smile. It's just ridiculous, Judge. The girl is clumsy. She bumped into me. I was holding a glass of wine, and when she stumbled, probably because she had too much champagne, the wine spilled. It was an accident. A tragic accident, of course, but accidents happen. She's just looking for a payout because she comes from less fortunate circumstances. The way she said less fortunate dripped with venom. It was clear within seconds what this was really about. It wasn't about a dress. It was about class. It was about control. Maya began to cry silently. I wasn't drunk, she whispered. I don't drink. I'm 3 months pregnant. The courtroom went deadly silent. Even the bailiff looked up. Evelyn rolled her eyes. Oh, please. That's probably not even my son's child. That's why she's rushing this wedding. Judge Sterling slammed her gavel down so hard it made the stenographer jump. That is enough. She roared. You will not slander the plaintiff in my courtroom. We are here to talk about the dress and the damages. You claim it was an accident. Maya claims it was assault. This is a he said, she said situation, or at least that's what you think it is. The judge leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. But I see here that Maya has brought evidence. Maya, what is in that large garment bag next to you? Maya wiped her eyes and unzipped the black bag. She pulled out the wedding dress. It was a ruin. The entire front bodice, the intricate lace, the silk skirt, it was soaked in a deep, dark purple stain. But it wasn't just a splash. The stain was targeted. It covered the chest and the face area. It looked violent, Your Honor, Maya said, her voice gaining strength. If I bumped into her, the wine would be on my side. Or my arm. Look at the stain. It is directly on the front. She threw it like a baseball. And she didn't just ruin the dress. After she did it, she grabbed the microphone from the DJ and told 300 guests that the wedding was over because the bride was a dirty gold digger. My parents were humiliated. My grandmother had a panic attack and had to be taken to the hospital. Evelyn sighed loudly, checking her watch. She's exaggerating. I took the microphone to apologize for the spill. She's twisting everything. My son, David, knows the truth. He knows I would never hurt him. Judge Sterling looked at Evelyn with a look of pure disgust. We will get to your son in a moment. But right now, I want to address your attitude. You are standing there with a smirk on your face while this young woman describes the worst night of her life. You think this is a game. You think because you are wearing a Chanel suit, you are untouchable. Evelyn lifted her chin. I am a respected member of the community. I chair the charity board. I don't throw wine at people. We'll see about that, Judge Sterling said, opening a new folder on her desk. Because unlike most cases that come into this courtroom, this incident happened at a wedding. And do you know what weddings have, Mrs. St. Clair? They have videographers. They have cameras everywhere. And the plaintiff has submitted a thumb drive containing raw footage from 3 different angles of the incident. The color drained from Evelyn's face instantly. The smirk vanished. She gripped the edge of the defense podium. She didn't know about the video. She thought it was her word against Maya's. Judge Sterling signaled to the bailiff. Play the tape. As the large monitor in the courtroom flickered to life, the air grew heavy with anticipation. What was on that screen was about to change the civil lawsuit into a criminal investigation. Asterisk, the courtroom monitor flickered. And suddenly, the high-definition footage of the wedding reception filled the screen. It was a beautiful scene at first, soft lighting, flowers everywhere, guests laughing. You could see Maya, looking radiant in her white dress, standing near the cake table. Then you saw Evelyn enters the frame. She wasn't stumbling. She wasn't being bumped. She was stalking. The camera captured her walking with a purpose, a full glass of red wine in her hand. She moved through the crowd like a shark in water. The courtroom watched in stunned silence as the on-screen Evelyn waited until Maya turned around. There was no collision. There was no accident. The video clearly showed Evelyn pausing, taking a breath, and then violently hurling the contents of the glass directly into Maya's face and chest. But the video didn't stop there. The audio was crisp. You could hear the gasp of the guests. And then you heard Evelyn's voice, clear as day, cutting through the silence. Now you look like the trash you really are. In the courtroom, reality seemed to suspend. The video played on, showing Evelyn grabbing the microphone, shouting insults, and physically shoving a bridesmaid who tried to intervene. Judge Sterling paused the video on the frame where Evelyn's face was twisted in pure, unadulterated rage. It was the face of a person who had lost all control. The judge turned slowly to look at the defendant. Evelyn St. Clair was no longer standing tall. She was pale, her hands shaking violently. The confident socialite had evaporated, replaced by a woman who knew she had been caught in a lie so big it couldn't be spun. So, Judge Sterling said, her voice ice cold. She bumped into you? You were holding the glass and she stumbled. Is that the lie you want to stick with, Mrs. St. Clair? Because I am looking at a woman who just committed assault and battery on camera. Evelyn stammered, trying to find words. It was edited. That video is doctored. My son would never allow this evidence. Where is David? I wanted to speak to my son. She started looking around the courtroom frantically. David, tell them. The doors at the back of the courtroom opened. A young man in a suit walked in. He looked tired, sad, and angry. It was David, the groom. Evelyn's face lit up with desperate hope. David, thank God. Tell this judge that Maya is lying. Tell her about the prenup. Tell her everything. But David didn't look at his mother. He walked straight to the plaintiff's side and stood next to his wife, taking Maya's hand. He looked at the judge and said, Your Honor, I am the one who gave Maya the footage, and I am here to testify against my mother." The sound that came out of Evelyn's mouth was a primal scream of betrayal. "You ungrateful brat," she shrieked, forgetting where she was. "I paid for that wedding. I paid for your education. I own the house you live in. How dare you stand there with that gold digger and betray your own flesh and blood?" Judge Sterling banged the gavel, but Evelyn was past the point of listening to gavels. She was unraveling. The mask of sanity was slipping, revealing the controlling, narcissistic monster underneath. "Mrs. St. Clair, silence," Judge Sterling shouted. "One more outburst and you will be held in contempt. Mr. St. Clair, please proceed. Why are you testifying against your mother?" David looked at his mother with tears in his eyes. "Because this isn't the first time, Your Honor. She has destroyed every relationship I've ever had. She poisoned my dog when I moved in with my college girlfriend because she wanted me to come home. She faked a heart attack on my graduation day because I wasn't paying enough attention to her. But this, ruining our wedding, attacking my pregnant wife, I can't protect her anymore. She needs help, or she needs to be locked away." The courtroom was dead silent. The accusation of poisoning a dog hung in the air. This wasn't just a mean mother-in-law. This was a psychopath. Evelyn was vibrating with rage. She pointed a shaking finger at her son. "You are dead to me," she hissed. "I will cut you out of the will. You will be on the street. And that baby will never see a dime of the St. Clair fortune." Judge Sterling had heard enough. "You seem to be under the impression that money controls the law. Mrs. St. Clair, you think you can buy your way out of assault? You think you can threaten witnesses in my courtroom? Let me clarify something for you. The moment that video played, this ceased to be a civil dispute about a dry cleaning bill. You admitted to the assault on tape. You confessed to malicious intent. And now, hearing testimony about past abusive behavior, I am concerned for the safety of this couple." Evelyn laughed, a high-pitched, hysterical sound. "Safety? I'm an old woman. What am I going to do? Splash them with more wine?" She reached into her expensive Hermes bag. The bailiff, Officer Miller, instantly tensed up, his hand moving to his holster. "Put the bag down, ma'am," he shouted. "I'm just getting a tissue." Evelyn snapped, pulling her hand out. But it wasn't a tissue. It was a heavy metal perfume bottle. In a split second of madness, fueled by the realization that she had lost control over her son, she didn't spray it. She threw it. She hurled the heavy glass bottle across the courtroom, aiming not at the judge, but directly at Maya's stomach. Time seemed to slow down. David lunged in front of his wife. The bottle struck him in the shoulder with a sickening thud, bouncing off and shattering on the floor. "She's trying to kill the baby!" Someone screamed from the gallery. Pandemonium erupted. Officer Miller vaulted over the barrier. Evelyn was screaming, "If I can't have him, no one can. That baby is a bastard. It's not a St. Clair." She was clawing at the air, her eyes wide and white, completely detached from reality. This was no longer a trial. This was a crime scene. Asterisk, the chaos in the courtroom was absolute. Officer Miller tackled Evelyn St. Clair to the ground, but she fought with the strength of a woman possessed. Her pearls broke, scattering across the wooden floor like hail. "Get your hands off me," she screeched, kicking and scratching. "I am Evelyn St. Clair. I know the governor. I will have your badge." 2 more deputies rushed in from the side entrance to assist, pinning her arms behind her back. Judge Sterling stood up, her face pale but her authority unshaken. "Clear the gallery," she ordered. "Lock the doors. Nobody leaves." The audience was scrambling, terrified by the sudden violence from the well-dressed woman. Maya was sobbing in David's arms, checking him for injuries. I'm okay, David whispered, though he was wincing in pain where the heavy glass bottle had struck his collarbone. As the officers hauled Evelyn to her feet, she looked deranged. Her expensive hair was a mess, her suit was rumpled, and her eyes were wild. She wasn't looking at the officers. She was staring fixedly at Maya with a look of pure hatred. "You took him from me," she spat, struggling against the cuffs. "You witch." You think you won? This isn't over. I have money. I have lawyers who will bury you. Judge Sterling leaned over the bench, her voice booming through the microphone. Mrs. St. Clair, you are currently under arrest for assault with a deadly weapon, assault on a police officer, and disorderly conduct. And that is just the beginning. Bailiff, take her to the holding cell immediately. And I want a full psychiatric evaluation ordered before her arraignment. You can't do this. Evelyn screamed as they dragged her toward the side door. David, tell them to stop. I'm your mother. David turned his back on her. It was a small gesture, but it was the most powerful thing he could have done. He buried his face in Maya's hair, refusing to acknowledge the woman who had birthed him. The door slammed shut behind her, muting her screams, but the tension in the room remained thick enough to cut with a knife. Judge Sterling sat back down, taking a moment to compose herself. She looked at the young couple, who were clinging to each other as if they were the only two people in the world. Mr. and Mrs. St. Clair, the judge said softly, I am incredibly sorry that you had to go through that. In 20 years on the bench, I have rarely seen such a display of unhinged malice. She picked up her pen. I am granting the judgment for the plaintiff in the full amount of $10,000 for the wedding damages. But more importantly, I am issuing an immediate permanent restraining order. Evelyn St. Clair is not to come within 500 yards of either of you or your future child. If she tries to contact you, even through a lawyer, she goes back to jail. Maya looked up, tears streaming down her face. Thank you, Your Honor. We just want to be safe. But the drama wasn't over. As the court clerk was processing the paperwork, a detective entered the courtroom and approached the bench. He whispered something to Judge Sterling. The judge's eyes widened. She beckoned David to the bench. Mr. St. Clair, she said, her voice grave. The police have just executed a search warrant on your mother's vehicle in the parking lot based on her threats here today. They found something you need to know about. David approached the bench, his legs feeling like lead. What is it? He asked. The judge hesitated. They found a folder. It contains photos of Maya, her schedule, her doctor's office location, and receipts for a private investigator. But disturbingly, they also found a solicitation request. Your mother was trying to hire someone to intervene in the pregnancy. David grabbed the edge of the bench to steady himself. The room spun. It wasn't just a tantrum. It wasn't just jealousy. It was a calculated plot. His mother had been planning to harm his unborn child all along. The bottle she threw wasn't a spur-of-the-moment reaction. It was an attempt to finish what she had started. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The woman who raised him, who baked him cookies, who drove him to soccer practice, was a monster. She wanted to kill my baby, David whispered, his voice cracking. She actually wanted to kill my baby. The detective spoke up. We are upgrading the charges, son. This is now conspiracy to commit murder. She's not going to get bail. She's going to Twin Towers. Twin Towers Correctional Facility. The hardest jail in the county. Evelyn St. Clair, the lady of the manor, was about to be thrown into a concrete box with real criminals. There would be no pearls, no perfumes, no servants. Just steel bars and the consequences of her own evil. David walked back to Maya, his face ashen. He didn't tell her the details right then. He couldn't hurt her anymore today, but he held her tighter than he ever had before. They had survived. But the woman who tried to destroy them was about to enter a nightmare of her own making. The transition from the pristine, air-conditioned courtroom to the chaotic holding area of the county jail was a shock to the system for Evelyn St. Clair. She was still ranting as they booked her, demanding to see the warden, demanding her phone, demanding a glass of water with lemon. Do you know who I am? She screeched at the booking officer, a stern woman who had seen it all. I am a St. Clair. My husband built this city. The officer didn't even look up from the computer screen. Name? She asked. I refused to answer. Evelyn shouted. I want my lawyer. The officer sighed, signaled to two large guards, and said, Jane Doe, process her. They took her pearls. They took her Chanel jacket. They took her expensive heels. Evelyn fought them every step of the way, scratching at the guards, spitting, screaming profanities that would make a sailor blush. But when they handed her the orange jumpsuit, stiff, smelly, and stained, she froze. She held the fabric in her manicured hands, and for the first time, a look of genuine fear crossed her face. "I can't wear this," she whispered. It's filthy. It has polyester." The guard laughed. "It's fire retardant, princess. Put it on, or we put it on for you." Stripped of her finery, Evelyn looked small, older, vulnerable. She was marched down the long, echoing hallway toward the high-security wing. Other inmates banged on the glass as she passed. "Fresh meat," someone yelled. "Hey, fancy lady, you got any money on your books?" Evelyn flinched with every shout. She was led to a cell that was smaller than her walk-in closet at home. The door slammed shut with a finality that echoed in her bones. She was alone. There was a stainless steel toilet in the corner, a thin mattress on a concrete slab, and silence. The kind of silence that forces you to think, but Evelyn wasn't thinking about what she did wrong. She was thinking about revenge. She sat on the bunk, rocking back and forth. "They'll pay," she muttered to herself. "David will come back. He always comes back. He needs money. He'll drop the charges." She was delusional, trapped in her own narcissism. Hours passed. Night fell. The jail came alive with the sounds of screaming, fighting, and keys clanking. Evelyn huddled in the corner, cold and terrified. The next morning, she was dragged out for her arraignment. But this time, it wasn't Judge Sterling. It was a criminal court judge, Judge Davis, known as the Hammer. And the courtroom wasn't empty. It was packed with press. The video of her throwing the bottle had leaked. It was viral. "Mother-in-law from hell attacks pregnant bride" was the headline on every news station. Evelyn walked in, shackled at the waist and ankles. She looked for her high-powered family attorney, Mr. Thorne. He was there, looking grim. He leaned over to her. "Evelyn, it's bad," he whispered. "The conspiracy evidence, the solicitations, they have you on tape trying to hire a hitman for the baby. I can't fix this." Evelyn stared at him. "Buy them off," she hissed. "Offer the judge $1 million. Offer the prosecutor $2 million. Mr. Thorne pulled back, looking at her with horror. "Evelyn, stop. You're digging your own grave. There is no buying this. You are looking at 20 years to life." The judge called the case. The prosecutor stood up. "Your Honor, the people request that bail be denied. The defendant has significant assets and is a flight risk. Furthermore, she has made active threats against the witnesses and the unborn child while in custody." Judge Davis looked at Evelyn over his glasses. "Denied," he said simply. "Remanded to custody until trial." Evelyn screamed. A raw, animalistic scream of despair. "No, you can't. I have a gala next week. I have a life." The bailiffs dragged her out, her orange jumpsuit bright against the drab courtroom walls. As she was hauled away, she caught a glimpse of David in the back row. He wasn't crying anymore. He was watching her with a cold, detached expression. He had finally broken the chain. He was free. And she was the one in chains. Back in her cell, reality finally broke through the delusion. She wasn't getting out. Her money was useless here. Her name meant nothing. She was just inmate number 58,920. She lay down on the hard mattress and stared at the ceiling, the image of her son turning his back on her playing on a loop in her mind. She had tried to control everything, and in doing so, she had lost the only thing that actually mattered. She had destroyed her own legacy. 6 months later. The trial of Evelyn St. was the most watched event of the year. The jury took less than 2 hours to reach a verdict. Guilty on all counts. Assault, battery, conspiracy to commit murder. The judge sentenced her to 25 years in state prison. At 55 years old, it was effectively a life sentence. When the verdict was read, Evelyn didn't scream. She didn't fight. She just slumped in her chair, a broken, empty shell of a woman. The fight had left her. The realization that she would die in prison had finally settled in. Meanwhile, Life for David and Maya had transformed. They had moved to a different state, changing their phone numbers and cutting ties with anyone who was loyal to Evelyn. They bought a small house with a big backyard far away from the mansions and the country clubs. It was modest, but it was peaceful. There were no surprise inspections, no insults, no poison pets. Just quiet. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Maya went into labor. David was by her side the entire time. When their daughter Lily was born, she was perfect. Healthy, screaming, and beautiful. David held his daughter in his arms, tears streaming down his face. He looked at her tiny hands, her innocent face. He thought about his mother. He thought about how she had wanted to snuff out this little life before it even began, all because of her own twisted need for control. He kissed his daughter's forehead and whispered, "I will never let anyone hurt you, especially not family." In prison, Evelyn St. was working in the laundry room. Her hands, once manicured and soft, were red and chapped from harsh detergents. She was folding gray prison uniforms, a stark contrast to the silk and satin she used to wear. Another inmate, a young woman named Star, bumped into her. "Watch it, Grandma," Star sneered. The old Evelyn would have slapped her. The old Evelyn would have shouted, "Do you know who I am?" But this Evelyn just kept her head down. "Sorry," she whispered. It was an accident. She had learned. The hard way. She received photos of the baby from a relative who still visited occasionally. She taped one to her cell wall. It was a picture of David holding Lily. They looked so happy. Evelyn touched the photo with a trembling finger. She realized now that she could have been part of that happiness. She could have been the grandmother who spoiled the baby. She could have been loved. But she chose hate. She chose control. And now, she was watching their lives through a 4x6 glossy photo in a concrete box. A ghost in her own son's life. The story of Evelyn St. became a cautionary tale. It was discussed on talk shows and in law schools. It became the ultimate example of how toxic parenting can destroy a family. But for David and Maya, it wasn't a story. It was just a chapter they had finally closed. They sat on their porch one evening, watching the sunset, the baby sleeping in a bassinet between them. "Do you think she thinks about us?" Maya asked softly. David looked at the horizon. "I'm sure she does," he said. "But we don't think about her. Not anymore." They had won the hardest battle of all. They had broken the cycle of abuse. They were free. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple, they knew that the best revenge wasn't prison or lawsuits or public humiliation. The best revenge was simply being happy without her. Moral of the story: family isn't about blood. It's about respect. You can have all the money in the world, but if your heart is full of poison, you will end up with nothing. And if you ever find yourself in a courtroom, remember, the truth always leaves a trail. And cameras are everywhere. If you enjoyed this intense story of justice and karma, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more daily courtroom dramas. We bring you the stories that prove actions have consequences. See you in the next case.